crowd or something like that, right? Good, wonderful. I was asked to demonstrate a couple of things on the organ when I get around there, but I'll start over here on the piano. We got this piano in about, what do I want to say, about 2008 or 9. We had an old Steinway that was brown. That's about all I'll say about that. It had been donated by a family, and that's what a lot of churches have, a donated instrument. So I sort of led the way. Louise Miller pushed for many years. There used to be an angel organ here. There is still one at the Lordship Church. And Louise Miller would never say anything bad about anything. That was her generation, and that's also who she was. And she told me, she said, I don't think that company ever made a really good organ. Now that's a hardcore thing for Louise Miller to say. And that's what it was. So in 1962, this one went in. And I remember telling Louise when she was introducing me to it when I first came in 96, and 1962, and I said, that's a famous year. And Louise said, why is that? And I said, that's the year I graduated from high school. Louise looked at me and she said, you could have told me a lot of other things today, Dr. Joe. She said, I'm not going to tell you when I graduated from high school. But Louise oversaw the installation, and she brought Jerry Hancock, one of the big New York City organists, down to do the first recital here. This is a wonderful instrument. We talked last week about the pipes. These pipes that you see in the front are, the French have a word for, they are faux pipes, F-A-U-X, which means they're false. They are for appearance. Like there's no real air going through them. The pipes are all behind, and some larger ones are on either side of the material that's kind of a burlap material. Now, I took some of you back last time, and we went back into the back room where you can see where the air comes up. The air comes in the hallway going down to Lower Packard Hall. There's a grating about this size, and that's all the air for the organ. The whole system is right there. This is why, I love telling this, this is why in the regular season, the non-COVID season, when we have the Lent fish suppers, that's why there is an extraordinarily strong fish smell in the sanctuary for some time. And the reason for that is all the air going into the pipe organ comes from down there, and they do the cooking of the fish down in Lower Packard Hall. So the wonderful aromas come up and go through, and they circulate, and they stay here for quite some time. You know, we're well into the spring before the air is, shall we say, different. But the pipe organ is quite a complicated instrument. It's a little 3-story house. There's one level here, then there's this level here, then there are 2 more levels above. And you can see the ladder on the side of the wall. And you go around to the back. If any of you haven't seen that and you want to, after we play today, we will go back there and I'll show you. There's a little trap door, and you have to climb up and unlock the trap door, and then you put the ladder up against the wall, and you climb almost straight up and down on the ladder, up to the first floor, and then you climb up there and you'll see another ladder permanently attached to the wall that goes to the next one, and then the next one on up. You've got to be real physically fit to do that. It's not for everyone, as you're climbing straight up. And the 2 guys who do that are, they're a little younger. They're younger than I, anyway. And they're very lightweight and used to climbing around up there. John Clark referred to them as Heckle and Jekyll. We sort of like that one. And Alex and his partner who They climb up there and they tune the pipes and they do all kinds of things. All right, I'm going to show the shades and then I'm going to demonstrate the Zimbelstern and the chime. So I thought I would start today with a couple of folk songs. We mentioned the story of Amazing Grace last week and how the actual melody itself is an early American folk song. We don't know who wrote it. One of the most important composers in the history of music is Anon, A-N-O-N, Anonymous. Many, many wonderful songs. So this one is comprised of 5 different notes. So we call it pentatonic. That is the same note as this one, only an octave higher. So we have 5 different notes in this piece. Another pentatonic note would be this one. And that has 1 or 2 notes that diverge a little bit from the pentatonic, but it still has the basic pentatonic. This one is the old folk song, The Water is Wide. It also functions as the melody to one of the hymns that is named Wally Wally. A divergence, just a little bit. One note will be a slight note, but essentially it starts off as a pentatonic thing, and the melody just diverges a little bit, but it still stays kind of centered around the pentatonic. Another one would be this one. So that has the same basic pentatonic thing, but it has a couple of extra notes thrown in. That is the hymn that was popular with the Shakers group. It's the gift to be simple, the gift to be free, to be down where we ought to be, and all of that, because they led this life that was a little bit different. They were a conservative sect, and quite often the women sang together, and they felt full of life when the Spirit came upon them, as we say. They felt like getting up and dancing around and singing. So their celebration of their faith and their belief was demonstrated by getting around and moving around. The Quakers tended to sit rather stolidly and quake a little bit, but the Shakers had to get up and move around. And Aaron Copland set their wonderful song, The Gift to Be Simple, in the midst of his wonderful ballet, Appalachian Spring. So I will play a little bit of The Water is Wide and then go into the other folk song. A little group of folk songs here for you. And keep in mind that the pentatonic is sort of a basic structure, and they depart a little from that, but it still holds them together. Thank you very much. Isn't folk music wonderful? We can't leave the folk music without doing another of the most wonderful ones, which actually was probably a riverboat song. We call these shanties. And this one is, of course, Shenandoah, which is a wonderful, wonderful song. And one of the lines in the original text of Shenandoah is, across the wide Missouri. Now, Shenandoah Valley, as you know, is in Virginia. I've actually played there. And I've played everywhere one time or another. Yeah, that's why I look like this. But I had an agent once, and I asked him to send me to every state. I wanted to play in all the major cities everywhere. And so by playing music, I got to travel and see the country. And I had, sometimes it was train trips, sometimes driving back and forth. This is quite a country we live in. It really is, you know. And I remember being there in Shenandoah, and it's a little valley, and across the wide Missouri is all about the people in the 18th and 19th century settling and spreading across the country. As you all know, the 13 colonies are along the coast, you know, so as everybody moved in more and more across the wide Missouri, and the Missouri rises up in the northwest, way up north. You'll recall that Lewis and Clark went up the Missouri River with Sacagawea, or Sacagawea, however you pronounce her name. And, you know, there's no pronunciation that comes down to us, really. But she knew the Indian communications, and the American Indians who were all over the country at that point. And the Missouri rises clear up, and the Missouri comes down. Kansas is a rectangle. It's embarrassingly rectangular looking, except for the northeast corner. It has a little bit of a nick. That's the Missouri River coming down through the Great West and down through Nebraska. And then it nicks the corner of Kansas, and then it goes down through Missouri and empties into the Mississippi, just below St. Louis. I learned all of that when we went driving from one town to the other to play gigs in all of these different places. But Shenandoah is one of these really beloved early American folk tunes. All right, this one, and then I'll demonstrate the Zimbelstern. Thank you. Isn't that a wonderful song? Wonderful song. All right. As I said last week, this was my very first robe when I first came here in '96. And Shirley Anderson loved it. And she liked this. And I think this is the fall thing, and I came here in September. So that's what it is. All right. Going to the organ. You're not supposed to stand on the pedals. So we're supposed to slide in across and adjust. We're not supposed to stand on the pedals. All right. Now, can you hear this? All right. Now, that is the cymbal stern. Okay, we got that. Well, let's see. I came here in '96. We got the cymbal stern about 4 or 5 years after I came. I went to see Bob Key. If any of you remember Bob Key, we remember Bob Key, don't we? He asked, "What is it? Do we need it?" Bob was a no-nonsense guy. And I said, "Bob, I would really like to have one. It would make me happy." And he looked at me and he said, "You and Miss Miller are going to break the bank of the church," because Louise was ordering copies of Messiah and other things. And they called her Miss Miller. And I said, "Well," he said, "Well, what's it going to cost?" And I said, "Well, around $4,000. And he said, $4,000? Well, what is this thing?" And I said, "Well, it's a system of bells." Now, I twisted his arm a little, got some music committee people, Gail Whittemore and I sort of ganged up on him a little bit. And so when we got it, I had it delivered from the Austin company, and we put it right here. It's like this. It's a big box that has a series of bells and a little thing that goes around and rings the bells. Now, bells do something to the sound. You know, if you throw a pebble in the pond, you see the water, it radiates out. Sound does that. So what happens when the bell sounds, it changes the air. And that's why the bell choir is a popular part of the church music program, and they ring the bell. The bells are a signal of something. So it turns and it goes around, and it makes a continual sound. Okay, a continuous sound, I should say. Now, can you see up there, can you see these things as I move them up and down? Look up between the pipes. Can you see that? We call them the shades or the shutters. You do it with 2 different pedals. Now, can you see the one? And then the other. Can you see that? So that is one division. The bottom one there is the choir division. And then the swell division, that's the names for it, is that one. Or if you put your foot between both of them, which Louise Miller showed me how to do, you can move both of them up and down at the same time, like so. So listen to the cymbal stern now. Can you hear it? So as the shades and shutters are open, you can hear them better. So I purposely had it put on that part of the organ so I could control how loud I wanted it. Another one of the organ's bells, there's the chime. So sometimes when we do the chimes of Christmas, the Silent Night, Then we have the Zimbelstern going at the same time. Like so. Now, the only issue, let me turn the Zimbelstern off for now, because you don't want it all the time. But Bob Key wanted to know what real musical reason to have the Zimbelstern. And I looked at him and I said, Bach had a Zimbelstern on his organ at St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, where he was from 1725 to 1750. And Bob Key looked at me and he said, Bach. He said, oh, you and Miss Miller and this Bach guy. But that's what we think swung the vote in order to get to, well, because Bach had one. It's a little thing. Organs sometimes have little special effects. Because the piano, the different effects are created by how you stroke the keys and how you manipulate the pedals. With organ, it's what setting you have. For instance, there's a gedeckt, which is a flute. There's another one. There's another one. That one is an octave higher, so that is a 4-foot pipe. And here's another one. That's above that. So by pressing one note and using these settings here, we can create all kinds of different sounds. Now we get kind of close, and I'll demonstrate this, and I'll play that. What was the song you asked me for? Savior like a shepherd. Is that the one you asked me for? Savior like a shepherd. Da, 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 da. Is that one? And I'll play that. Okay, I'll play that one. This is as close as we can get to a clarinet. Nice sound, huh? So, if I add the cymbal to it, that's okay. Could you hear that? If I add this, that's a different sound. If I do this, let's see, what do we have here? That's a quiet flute sound. Lovely sound. That is a chromohorn, which is probably as close as we can get to an oboe. So I'm going to play a little of that song and then use some of these solo stops, and then that'll probably be enough for one day. You'll get tired of hearing me play. This is the point where you're supposed to, oh no, we can never get tired. So I'm going to set this one up here. This is Flutes and Strings. This is as close as we can get to a viola sound. That adds a celeste, which is another mixture. And that adds a flute. And then when I do this, it's a little bit of tremolo. It's a little bit of a waving sort of sound. That's tremolo is what some singers have a lot of, some have too much of, but it's a richness of the voice, So I can combine all of this and put a nice pedal in the flute. That's a Borden. Now listen to this one. That's a big one. That one is over on this side on the second floor up, and it's this big around. It's a big flute. This is a principal. It's what we call a principal. This is a Borden. There's another one. There's the Borden that's an octave higher. Can you hear that? It's the same pitch, only 8 notes higher. There's another one. And this one is one of my favorite ones. We boys love these sounds. That's a bombard. That's a big, noisy one. That one's a fogoto. So, that one is an octave higher. When you put them together, so when you do things at the organ, you combine things together. Now this one, that is 2 octaves higher. So you blend them all together. So the art of playing these pipe organ like this one is what we call the registration. That's the different sounds that you blend together. Okay, so we'll do a little of that hymn that you asked for. And I'll start out with oboe and flute, and I'll do some little fun things for you. and it made a higher frequency. So the idea was that all of those sounds are part of when you play the whole thing. So in other words, that's what the overtone principle is. When I play this big full thing, that sounds that way because of the overtones. One more time, here come the overtones. Listen for them. 1, 2, 7, 8, 3, 4, 5. Is that cool or what? We do a little organ and piano each time. That's called the science. That's the science of acoustics, as we say. Old college professor word. I guess when I get here, I'm in my blabbermouth stage because I've just taught a class before I came here. Sorry about that. All right. Yes, question.
Could you play the Star Spangled Banner, please? Do we have time?
Play the what?
Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, of course, we always have time to play that. And are you all taking note that we do that Ukrainian anthem? Oh, good. Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful piece. Somebody asked Allison because she was putting the text of it up on the screen, and somebody asked Allison, "Is that something we can sing?" So Allison answered her, and she said, "Well, it's one thing to sing Spanish, to sing French, to sing English. Nobody knows. There's probably only one person in the sanctuary who could sing Ukrainian, and that would be Zoli, who's a master of all the known languages that we have. As Zoli Toma, be the only one. Yes, you want the national anthem? Okay. Do you mind if I really open it up and play it? Okay. All right. Put your recording machines on. Yes, this will be good. I've actually been asked to write out some of my arrangement of some of the different chord things for the big AGO convention, which is in Seattle. And it's one of those monster organs on the West Coast that has like umpteen pipes. Like this one is 49 rank. The United Church in Bridgeport, where Paul Knox was music director for a long time, that one was about 70, do you remember what that was? 73 or 4 ranks. And so, and that was essentially twice as big. Yeah, it's a huge sound, but then there was a huge space over there too. And if you get to the big one, the Hope Jones in New Jersey on the shore, that one is like 300 or 400. The one at West Point is just gigantic. The problem with the one at West Point is it's really too large for the room. And that's the problem. The one in Atlantic City has a lot of theater organ stops, whistles and bells and all kinds of other stuff. So you have to become not just a keyboard player, you have to become part of a mechanic. You have to know how to do all of these things. And in the 25 to 26 years I've been here, I have gotten much, much better. When I first started here, I did all right, but I was really more of a pianist. But I could play organ, but really understanding. And Louise Miller would sit about halfway back on this side, right behind, and I would, and she was very short, and then she would walk past, and I would ask her, how did I do? And she'd tell me. She would never tell you unless you asked her. But if you ask her, she'd tell you. She was no nonsense that way. I loved Louise. She was so straight, so honest. And one day we had done the old hymn, Jesus Calls Us, or the Tumult. Da, 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 da. And I guess I played it a little, at a pretty good clip. And after the service, we were in the reception, and she said, do you have something going this afternoon? You have another concert or something this afternoon? And I said, not really. And Louise looked at me, and she said, well, you seem to be in a hurry to get through with that hymn. So she said, now, I want you to go home and look at the hymn. Do you have a hymn book at home? And I said, yes. She said, you should always have a hymn book at home, and look at it. Look at these things before you play. And then the next time I'll hear you play it. And so I go, da 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 da. Say, oh, I was sort of racing through it, wasn't I? Da 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 da. Gives people a chance to breathe and pronounce the words. So that's the job of the organist, is not to do a bunch of solo things. I mean, when you're doing preludes and postludes, that's fine. But when you're playing the hymns belong to the people, and you have to make it natural and possible for them to sing with it. So it was about a month and a half after that, because John Clark always picked the hymns, and I looked back and I saw her sitting there, and I thought, oh, here we go again. So I, da 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 bum bum dum, ba da 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 da. So I turned around then. After the hymn was over, we went to a reading or something. I turned around like that and looked back in Louise's direction, and she did this. That was Louise's sign that all is well. That was it. She gave me a sign. Okay. All right, we'll go out with a bang here with the National Anthem. This will be kind of loud. All right. I'm going to put on my glasses too, if I remember where they are. Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry if I went on a little bit too long. You're catching me.
Very interesting.
Oh, good. You're later in the day where I've already been a teacher in front of a class before coming here, so it is what it is.